In the village of Era, in West Africa, there lived a man named Mbai. He was not just an ordinary man. Mbai was known far and wide for his incredible talent in constructing houses. No one could design houses as strong, beautiful, and unique as his. Kings and the wealthy sought him out for his amazing work. His skills made him famous, and as a result, his heart was filled with pride and arrogance. However, Mbai had a past that he couldn't escape. He was once a careless young man who refused to listen to his parents. He was rude and notorious. He dropped out of school and spent his time playing around with the village girls. He never thinks about the consequences of his actions. One day, his reckless behavior caught up with him when he got a poor orphan girl named Ekenta pregnant. When Ekenta's uncle brought her to Mbai's family, hoping to make things right, Mbai coldly denied the child was his and sent them away disgracefully. Her uncle sent her out of his house. "Go and find the man that got you pregnant," he bellowed. Heartbroken and abandoned, Ekenta struggled to care for herself, living in poverty and neglect. Sadly, during labor, she had complications. After giving birth to a baby boy, whom she named Tobe, Ekenta died. But before her last breath, she whispered a curse. "Mbai will offend the gods, and no one but his uncursed son will lift the curse." Years passed, and Mbai's skill as a house builder only grew more famous. He built homes for the richest people, and he basked in the attention and praises. He thought he was untouchable, and his talent made him greater and richer than others. One day, just as the sun set, a mysterious stranger appeared at Mbai's doorstep. His face was hidden, and his voice was low and powerful. "I have heard your talents, Mbai. You are the best builder in all the lands," the stranger said, placing a golden box in front of him. "Inside this box is a rare material. Build a house with it, and your name will live forever. But beware, if you do this, you will anger the gods." Mbai's pride swelled. How could he resist the chance to build something no one else could? He believed himself too skillful to fail or to even fear the gods. Without thinking twice, he accepted the challenge. Mbai worked day and night, using the rare material from the stranger's box. But something was wrong. The walls crumbled no matter how perfectly he laid the bricks, and the foundation sank as if the earth itself resisted his effort. Still, Mbai refused to give up. He pushed harder. His pride refused to let him stop. Finally, after many growing weeks, he built a house that seems indestructible. It was grand, unlike anything anyone had ever seen. He stood back, admiring his work with a grin on his face. He believed he had accomplished what no one else could. It became the talk of the entire village and its surroundings. The villagers and people far and wide were coming to admire this great work. But one day, as night fell, the sky darkened, and a terrible storm gathered over the village. Thunder roared, and the lightning struck the house, shattering it into pieces. From the broken remains, a dark shadow rose, whispering in a chilling voice, "You were warned, Mbai. For your pride, you and your descendants are cursed." The dark shadow disappeared into the thin air. Suddenly, Mbai's hands twisted in agony. He fell to the ground, crying out in pain as his fingers became rigid, unable to move. The very hands that once crafted homes and wealth were now useless. Paralyzed by the god's wrath, the curse has taken hold. The village began to suffer soon after. Crops failed, animals began to die, and the land turned barren. Everyone whispered that Mbai's actions had angered the gods and brought misfortune to them all. Once a man of great pride and unmatched skill, Mbai's name had been spoken with admiration across the land. His ability to build the strongest, most magnificent homes made him famous. But after defying the gods by constructing a forbidden house with the mysterious material, everything changed. The curse placed upon Mbai was not just a punishment for his arrogance. It was the undoing of his entire generation. In the days that followed, the village of Era began to feel the weight of Mbai's curse. The once fertile lands where crops grew tall and lush started to dry up. The green fields turned brown, the soil hard and cracked. Farmers who once depend on their bountiful harvest, watched as their crops withered before their eyes. The river that ran through the village, providing life to all, began to recede. Fishermen could no longer catch enough to feed their families. Even the animals, once strong and healthy, grew weak. Cows, goats, and chicken fell ill, dying without explanation. Mba's family, once proud of him, soon turned their backs on him. His parents, Udapu and Okapu, who had once boasted of their son's great talent, now looked at him with shame and fear. They could no longer hold their heads high in the community. "Your pride has brought this curse upon us all," his father shouted one day. "You have destroyed us, Mba. Our name will be spoken with disgrace for generations." His brothers and sisters, who had once relied on his success, abandoned him as well. They couldn't bear to be associated with the man who had brought misfortune to their family. In their eyes, Mba was no longer a skilled builder, but a man whose foolishness had angered the gods. Even his wife, Chiku, who had once loved him deeply, began to distance herself. She could not understand the change in Mba. His duty as a man failed. His hands were useless. His pride shattered, and his once strong spirit was now broken. She too left him, returning to her father's house. Mba was alone. His home, once filled with children, visitors, and admiration, was now a desolate place. The walls that had witnessed laughter and joy now echoed with silence. The suffering spread beyond his family. He began to face rejection on every side. The entire village of Era began to turn against him. At first, the villagers had tried to help him. They believed he could find a way to lift the curse, to fix the damage he had caused. But as the weeks turned into months, and the curse grew only stronger, their patience wore thin. One morning, as Mba tried to walk through the marketplace, a group of villagers blocked his path. "Why do you still walk among us?" an elder shouted. "It's your fault that our fields are barren and our children go hungry. Because of you, we suffer," another man yelled, throwing a rotten piece of fruit at him. Soon, more villagers joined in, hurling insults and stones. Mba shielded himself, but his hands, once his greatest tool, were useless to protect him. He stumbled through the crowd, humiliated, broken, and terribly injured as they spat at him and cursed his name. The elders of the village held a meeting soon after. They declared that Mba was no longer welcome in Era. He was to be exiled and cast out from the village to live in isolation. The people believed that by removing him, they might find favor with the gods once again. Mba wandered the outskirts of the village, living in a small decaying hut that he had managed to build for himself. It was a far cry from the grand homes he used to construct. With his twisted hands, he could barely gather enough firewood to keep himself warm at night. The cold seeped into his bones, reminding him every day of the cause that had stolen his strength. He could no longer walk, and with no means to earn a living, he lived in poverty. His once powerful body grew frail, and his once proud spirit withered under the weight of his guilt and isolation. No one visited him. He was completely alone. Every day, from the distance, he would look out at the village he had once been part of and see the despair he had caused. He watched as the fields remained barren, as the river continued to dry up, and as the villagers struggled to survive. The guilt weighed heavily on his heart, crushing whatever hope he had left. His pride and arrogance cost him everything. He spent many nights crying out to the gods for mercy, begging for forgiveness, but no answer came. The gods remained silent, and the curse lingered. Mba spent years alone, living in a small decrepit hut far from the village. His hands, once his pride, were now a constant reminder of his downfall. The curse followed him wherever he went, and no village will accept him for fear of the gods' wrath. In his loneliness, Mba often thought of Ekenta, the orphan girl he had once wronged. He remembered how he had refused to accept responsibility for her pregnancy, casting her and their unborn child aside. He had been too proud, too consumed by his desire to protect his reputation. Now, that very pride had cost him everything. The guilt gnawed at him, and one night, as he sat in his dark hut, the memory of Ekenta's curse resurfaced in his mind. "Only your uncursed seed can lift this burden. A thought struck him like lightning. He had a son, Tobe, the child he had abandoned. Tobe, born before the curse, could be the key to breaking it. With newfound hope, Mbai visited the village of Era. He was a shadow of his former self, weak, frail, and desperate. He went straight to his father, Udapu, and knelt before him, tears streaming down his face. Father, I have wronged you. I was responsible for Ekenta's pregnancy, and in my pride, I denied it. She died because of me, and our son Tobe was left to suffer alone. Please, Father, I need your help. I need you to help find my son, he begged. Udapu, his father, and Okapu, his mother, was shocked by the confession. Udapu said nothing at first, but when he saw the depth of Mbai's regret, his anger softened. You have caused great pain, my son, he said, his voice heavy. It is not too late to make amends, but no one would accept you under this condition, not even your abandoned son. Mbai, raising his voice, cried out the more, Father, Tobe, my son, is the only one that can lift this curse. How? Udapu asked. Ekenta laid his curse before he died. Finding forgiveness in my son is the only remedy to my condition. Udapu was carried away in thought when Okapu, his wife, interrupted, begging him to help Mbai find his son. It's not going to be easy, Udapu said at last, but we will try. We will find Tobe. I pray he will find a place in his heart to forgive you. With the help of the village elders, Udapu and Mbai set out to search for Tobe. The boy, who had grown up without a mother and had been abandoned by his father, was now living as a street boy in a distant village, surviving by his wits. It took weeks, but they finally found him. He was ragged and hardened by the harsh life he had endured. At first, Tobe refused to acknowledge Mbai, the man who had denied his very existence. But Udapu, along with the elders, spoke to him with kindness, urging him to listen. Your father has made many mistakes that kept him in this condition, Udapu said gently, but he has come to make things right. He has a story to tell you, but before then, he needs your forgiveness, not just for his sake, but for the sake of the entire village. With a heavy heart, Tobe agreed to return to Era with his father and listen to his story. Back in Era, Mbai told Tobe everything about the forbidden material he had used, about the curse that had followed, and about how Ekenta, his mother, died after cursing him. Tobe listened in silence, the weight of his father's words pressing on him. He had every reason to turn away, to reject the man who had abandoned him and caused so much suffering. But deep within him, there was a spark of compassion, a memory of his mother he had never known. I'll do this not for you, Tobe said quietly, but for my mother and the entire village. With that, Tobe, the uncursed son, performed the ritual that would break the curse. He called upon the memory of his mother and the forgiveness of the gods. As he spoke, the clouds that had darkened the village for years parted, and a warm golden light bathed the land. The river began to rise once more. The crops slowly regained their blue hue, and the animals began to recover their strength. The village of Era was restored to its former glory. Mbai, once a proud and arrogant man, was humbled by the love and forgiveness of the son he had forsaken. The villagers, who had once shunned him, welcomed him back with open arms, recognizing the great sacrifice of forgiveness that Tobe had made for them all. Mbai spent the rest of his life living in peace, grateful for the forgiveness from his son,